All right, folks. Due to some technical difficulties, I'm going to have to redo my Sunday breakfast with the coach. For some reason, the camera wasn't working right, so I'm re-recording the important parts of that lecture. So what I'm doing, for those of you attending this on YouTube, is I'm starting now a lecture series on low-carb lies and the politics of profits. And I'm just basically tired of answering questions about keto and paleo and stuff I've been doing for years, even though I've written about it extensively. I'm going to do a several-part lecture series, so I hope you'll tune in every Sunday morning at 5 a.m. Pacific Time, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, as I go through litany of academic research and studies showing that the foundation of low-carb diets is based on lies and deception and misinformation and sleight of hand. So, for those of you who know me on a regular basis, I put oftentimes "we eat carbs" in big capital letters across the screen, and I use fitness model protege and client Andy Sinclair as an example. Recently, Krista Louise Fit in my Great Glutes at Home project. You've seen her in my projects. A lot of my before and afters. All are on carb-based diets, and we've talked about that extensively. For those of you who don't know me, throughout the 90s and early to mid-2000s, Robert Kennedy, publisher of Muscle Mag, dubbed me the trainer of champions. And I can tell you emphatically that 99% of my clients were on carb-based diets, period. Okay, and my cycle diet is based on carb-based diets, and I've been working with carb-based diets for my whole career, and of course I've amassed quite a successful career. So I want to start at the basics, because I think a lot of people don't realize the history of low-carb diets is based in deception and misinformation and flat-out lies in order to accrue profits. So I'm going to give you a little history on low-carb diets, and you'll see common themes emerge. And they're all based in misinformation. So there's an old saying that a lie can go around the world faster than the truth can even put its shoes on. And low-carb dieting nonsense is based in this kind of deception. So I call this part one is a history of low-carb diets, a brief history with some things behind the scene things you need to know. And then in part two, I'm going to continue with misinformation about carbohydrates and insulin, and then I'm go for there. So this is going to be a several-part series, and I hope you'll stay tuned. So let's get started. As quoted in Reuters, a very respectable reporting journalism, Reuters, a spokesman for the American Institute of Cancer Research said this about low-carb diets in 2004. Quote, "When unproven science becomes a sales pitch, some people get rich and the rest of us get ripped off." And that's from M. Fox, and the name of the article is "Low Carb Fad Seen as Unhealthy and a Ripoff" in Reuters, June 22nd, 2004. I'm going to give you a mountain of research here, because everyone demands that these days, and you're going to see that low-carb diets are based on the politics of profit. So that's just the beginning. Now, most of you should know or do know that the grandfather, I guess, at this point of low-carb dieting would be Atkins. So let's start there. When the Atkins diet first came out, here's what you need to know about what real and true nutritionists had to say about it. When it first came out, the chair of the nutrition department at Harvard warned physicians that recommending the Atkins diet, quote, "borders on malpractice." And that's from F.J. Stair and J. Witchy, and the name of that article is Diet Books, Facts, Fads, and Frauds, and that's in the journal Medical Opinion, issue number 1, 1972. In fact, though, fad diet fascist mindsets, none of this has any kind of impact or echo in the consumer's minds, okay? The promise of weight loss always supersedes common sense and a respect for your own well-being. And we call this hope over experience, all right? And this trend has continued ever since low-carb dieting variations of nonsense and bad science, like paleo, for existence. I've written about paleo in a couple of my own books. Paleo has been debunked time and time again for the misinformation that it's based on, continuing the theme of low-carb diets based on the politics of profits, and I'll get to that. And yes, my eyes are diverting to notes I've written. This was going to be a book at some point, but now I'm just putting it into a lecture series for all of my followers. So the thing is, the creators of the next fad diet frenzy, okay, they get in, they make millions of dollars in book publications and web domain income, and then they get out way before the academic and real world of research can catch up to them, and before they are replaced by the next generation of fad diet nonsense. About every 5 to 7 years. I've been around since the 70s, so I've seen it myself. And you need to be informed. You know, the old saying, people who don't learn from history are destined to continue repeating it. And that's why I'm bringing this to you. So we're going to start, like I said, with a history of low-carb lies and the politics of stupid, the politics of profit. So on February 10th, 2004, the Wall Street Journal published excerpts from New York City Medical Examiner's report on Dr. Atkins' death. The report indicated that Atkins weighed 258 pounds at the time of his death, making the diet guru clinically obese, and that he had a history of heart disease, congestive heart failure, and hypertension. Was this caused by his diet, or was his diet so hard that he couldn't follow it? Either way, it doesn't speak well to the Atkins empire. Atkins' widow, though, Veronica, told the Wall Street Journal she was outraged that the report had been made public, but even she conceded in a statement issued the same day when the story came out that her husband did have some progression of coronary artery disease in the last years of his life, including blockage of the secondary arteries. So now let's juxtapose this with Dr. Nathan Pritikin. Pritikin is, of course, considered the father of high-carb dieting. He died of complications due to leukemia. Leukemia being something that's a medical issue that's non-associated with diet or non-diet. But unlike Atkins, who wanted no autopsy on his body, Pritikin demanded that his body be autopsied. He wanted the world to know what the inside of his body may say about the diet that he followed. And the New England Journal of Medicine, and pay attention to this lecture, folks, to the quality of journals that I am going to quote from in this lecture, okay? It's very important that you understand the level of academic responsibility that I'm using here. So the New England Journal of Medicine published Pritikin's autopsy in an article called Nathan Pritikin's Heart. Pritikin's autopsy revealed that his arteries were as soft and pliable as a teenager's. That's a quote. Soft and pliable as a teenager's with no signs of heart disease. The pathologist wrote, and I quote, "In a man 69 years old, the near absence of atherosclerosis and complete absence of its effects are remarkable." There you go, high-carb dieting and health. He had the healthy arteries, etc., and cardiac health of a young man. So compare this to Atkins and the medical examiner's report that upon Atkins' death, he was overweight, almost 260 pounds, and stricken with hypertension and heart disease, and all conditions that Atkins and other low-carb conspirators claim that such a diet can cure or prevent. So real world says otherwise, okay, in Atkins' own case. So this is background information, a history of low-carb lies that you need to understand and learn so you don't keep falling susceptible to the same diet fad fallacies represented as being science-based. And we're going to continue a lot of this right now. So many people try to distort the facts of Atkins' weight and health at the time of his death. This is a reflection of how far diet has become religion in North American society. When the coroner's report on Atkins' death was leaked, Atkins' widow went from swearing on Larry King Live that her husband didn't have coronary artery disease to later finally admitting that Atkins' cardiovascular system may not have been as healthy and fit as the public had been led to believe. She said, and I quote, "Robert," meaning Dr. Atkins, "did have some progression of coronary artery disease in the last 3 years of his life, including some blockage of the secondary artery." So the point here is, folks, she obviously lied on Larry King when she swore that he didn't have heart disease, but knowing, of course, that sound bites, all right, on television are assumed by consumers to be fact and fact checked. All right, so a soundbite goes a long way, and once again, you lie once, and enough people hear it, they repeat the lie before the truth can catch up. So, very, very important there to keep these things in mind. Okay, the low-carb lies, low-carb dieting based on a faulty foundation of misinformation and bad science. A 2003 review of low-carb theories in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition, again, respectable journal, I think so, the Journal of American College of Nutrition concluded, and I quote, "Carbophobia is a form of nutritional misinformation infused into the American psyche through advertising, information, infomercials, and best-selling diet books." Let me quote that again. "Carbophobia is a form of nutritional misinformation infused into the American psyche through advertising, infomercials, and best-selling diet books." And I'm going to add to that, the fitness industry is an enabler now as well. It's probably the #1 enabler. And that Journal of American College of Nutrition is by S.N. Chauvin, and the article is called "The Zone Diet Phenomenon, A Closer Look at the Science Behind the Claims." Journal of American College of Nutrition, issue number 22, 2003, pages 9 to 17. So I'm giving you the academic background, folks, showing what the truth is behind low-carb lies and the politics of profits. So to that study, I'll add my own observation that after decades of revealing real research over and over again to people, people don't seem to want the truth. They want complicated formulas and macro food groups to blame and demonize for their weight issues when things maybe aren't nearly as cloudy and as complicated as you've been led to believe. So, however, Vogue trend followers of diets like to think that all the latest info is new, but it's just really newly recycled and more sophisticated. Look at the low-carb fad, okay? I'm going to give you some history here. There's a record of it going back as far as 1864 when a coffin maker named William Banting wrote a book called Letter on Corpulence, corpulence meaning fat, which advocated eating a ton of meat and fish and avoiding starch of saccharine matter. That fad came and went because it simply didn't work, except it worked for Banting, who made a lot of money from it. Sound familiar? Then we see in the 1920s, another doctor, another theme, came out advocating a minimum of 3 porterhouse steaks per day, all right, and claiming that only fresh fat meat and water were perfect foods. That diet trend collapsed as well. And then in the 1940s, a book came out exalting and extolling all the benefits of whale blubber as a diet staple. You know, the old quote that Eskimos live on it and Eskimos are healthy, blah, blah, blah. Then in the 1960s, Dr. Herman Thaler's book, Calories Don't Count, it became a bestseller, even as this book advised people against exercise. All right. Unfortunately for him, his diet empire collapsed when he got found guilty of mail fraud as a result of touting his popular brand of useless safflower oil tablets. But now, what happened was the publishing era of profits by diet fads was born. So that same year, another doctor, again that diet doctor theme, Dr. William Stillman came out with a book, The Doctor's Quick Weight Loss Diet, where he advocated his patients to eat only meat, eggs, and cheese. All right. This doctor actually died of a heart attack himself. Hello. He actually died of a heart attack himself, but not before misleading 20 million people to get on his diet. You seeing a trend here in the history? People who don't learn from history are destined to keep repeating it. So that's the trend. The diet, his diet, the doctor's quick weight loss diet, was applauded as the ultimate foolproof, and I'm quoting, path to permanent and joyful weight loss, like there's such a thing. And the book said in caps, works 100% of the time. Yeah, I guess death by heart attack does result in weight loss, doesn't it? Insert eye roll here. As you can see, one low-carb diet emerges like a shooting star, then it fades into obscurity, only to be replaced by another, and it produces a new bestseller for publishers, capitalizing on consumers' desperation and short attention spans. Consumers, unlike researchers like myself, consumers not recognizing, haven't we seen this somewhere before? Aren't we repeating the same theme that didn't work a few years earlier? Like I said, the advertising just gets more sophisticated. And as you see, the intervals between low-carb fads become closer and closer together, from 40 years apart to 20 years apart to 10 years apart to about every 3 or 5 years apart. So very, very important. And now, as you can see, in the modern era of book publishing, not much has changed except the sophistication of the marketing and the scam of writing the research. A scam Dr. Atkins relied on over and over in arguing the benefits of his version of low-carb nonsense and low-carb lies. In fact, his first printing of Dr. Atkins' Diet Revolution, published in 1972, back then, now let's focus on what someone may or may not know, and let's focus on some common sense, shall we, folks? His diet in 1972, that was our Diet Revolution, centered on recommending fried pork rinds as the perfect food. Yeah, you heard me right. Fried pork rinds was the perfect food back then. And of course, you'll find them now probably in the Doritos and chips and Cheetos junk food section of your grocery store. His diet also emphasized heavy cream, cheese, and meat. The 1972 version, the first version of the Atkins low-carb diet strategy, argued that bacon and butter were health foods, okay, and fresh, unprocessed whole food, like bananas, were in fact, quote, poison. Does that make any sense to you, folks? Bacon and butter as health foods, and bananas coming from the ground, produce, full of vitamins, nutrients, phytonutrients, they were considered poison. This is a diet guru, a nutrition expert. Are you kidding me? So you need to understand the background here of fabrication of fake truth, all right? Fake news, if you will. Atkins was a great self-promoter, as most diet and supplement hucksters are. He was featured in Vogue magazine, a popular woman's magazine at the time, where his diet ended up with the nickname the Vogue diet. And this is important because it was an era where the internet didn't exist. So getting featured in a woman's magazine, a popular woman's magazine, was as profitable as finding gold, right? He then became somewhat of a celebrity, appearing on talk shows, the whole circuit, etc. And by 1973, his publishers were reporting that the Atkins book was the fastest selling book in publishing history. Fastest selling book of any kind in publishing history, proving once again as a researcher that marketing and appearance trumps substance every time. Now, to the consumer, hearing that it's the number one fastest selling book in publishing history, the consumer mind thinks, well, that means it must work. They don't understand behind it the foundation of marketing and trying to cater to consumers' wish bias and what we call hope over experience. So once again, we see that marketing is more important than truth, because the truth takes a long time to catch up. So this is true today as well. I covered in my book, Understanding Metabolism, I covered paleo in 2 chapters, and we can see that paleo was also based on lies and based on misinformation, and it took archaeologists a long time to come on board and set the record straight about Paleo Man. And Paleo Man wasn't lean, he was frail and skinny, and there's a big difference, and I'll get to that another time. But what happened with Atkins being the fastest selling book of all time, it also meant other publishers were taking notice. And if you had a publishing company that was having trouble making a profit, then publishing a diet book was a sure way to get a publishing company back into a profit-generating results again. So this is the where, why, and how the politics of profits and the politics of stupidity began in earnest. All right. In his first version, the 1972 version of the Atkins Diet Revolution, Atkins wanted to create laws to have carbs banned. And this is ironic considering he died of advanced heart disease as an overweight 260-pound man. But in the nonsense of misrepresenting science, to misinformation, to downright fraud, Atkins even once claimed that someone could lose 85 pounds without exercising, and by eating 5,500 calories per day. Even someone like myself, who believes calorie counting is overrated and abused and misused, Of course, that kind of statement is ridiculous. This claim just strains all credulity and says something about the man who would say anything, something eye-catching and ear-catching at the time, just to sell people. Hence the politics of profits once again, and the politics of stupid, that people could actually believe something that lame, and that violates common sense on such a level. Let's talk about the doctor-prescribed diet meme as well. This seems to penetrate the consumer consciousness and the common sense of consumers. Oh, if it's by a diet, it must be legit. And here is what you need to know on that front about Atkins. Dr. Atkins died without ever publishing a single paper in any scientific journal, not one single paper in any scientific journal about anything. And while this should give anyone pause when reading his book, what it does, it allows him as a writer to not be accountable as you would be in an academic setting if you were writing research papers, etc. So in non-academic circles, you're freer to bend the truth, even skirt the truth if it doesn't suit your case, as we'll see below. It takes the academic world time to catch up because the academic researchers have constraints in peer review and other things like that that they must consider, whereas someone who's just spouting fad diet fiction can pretty much say whatever they want, and realizing that that'll get to the consumer faster than academic research, truth, and fact can catch up. So remember the old saying, figures lie and liars figure, and that is particularly true in the low-carb lies and politics of profits history of low-carb diets, as I'm talking about here. So then, in 1992, the Atkins diet was reissued, called the New Diet Revolution. By this time, publishers from 72 to 92 learned a lot about the cash cows of diet books. So there was a very aggressive marketing campaign to promote the book as something new, and the marketing worked, making the book the best-selling fad diet of all time. And I keep saying fad diet for a reason. This was buoyed somewhat by a very misleading article in the New York Times, and this is going to become very, very important below. All right, this New York Times article seemed to validate Atkins. Favorable follow-up stories from that New York Times article appeared in other network TV investigative shows like 2020, etc. However, the original New York Times article was flawed on many levels, and these flaws were exposed weeks later because it took researchers time to read the article and catch up. But here's what happens. With most fad diets, the imprint and the impression on consumers has already been made. Weeks later, critique of that doesn't matter unless you're an actual researcher. So the imprint and the goal of converting consumers into buying books and products has already been made. So Atkins was the new thing, and it made him $100 million in net worth. Now you need to follow me here for 1 minute. The ironic thing of all of this is that the original New York Times article was written by Gary Taubes, who himself, from that article, scored a book deal worth, and he got a healthy $700,000 book advance to write the book as well. More politics of profits, okay? Diet books were now officially big business. If you can advance someone $700,000 to write a book that continues a faulty theme, of course they're going to do it. And the problem was someone finally investigated the original New York Times article by Taubes and found it full of holes, all right, and discrepancies. The Washington Post shows that Taubes simply ignored all the research that didn't agree with his arguments. And that means it wasn't true investigative journalism. Some nutrition experts even felt deceived by Taubes. Here's some background politics of stupid that you need to know. For instance, John Farquhar, a professor emeritus of medicine at Stanford University at the time, he said this, quote, "I was greatly offended at how Gary Taubes tricked us all into coming across as supporters of the Atkins diet." And so it goes. Xavier P. Sr., director of Obesity Research Center at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital, called Taubes' article, and I quote, "irresponsible and written in bad faith." Of Taubes himself, Sr. said, "I think he's a dangerous man. I'm sorry I ever talked to him," unquote. And that in regards to Taubes' book deal, Sr. said, "Taubes is sold out." Again, politics of profit. Endocrinologist Gerald Reven said this of Tobbs: "He kind of set me up. I was horrified. I ended up being embarrassed as hell. The article was incredibly misleading." And so it goes. Low-carb lies and the politics of profits and lying for profits. So following Atkins, of course, there's been several variations of the same theme of low-carb lies. That theme being that meat is good and starches are bad. Everything from South Beach to paleo continues to mislead and misinform the public, all right? Paleo, like I said, I've discussed it in my book, Understanding Metabolism, is also based on misinformation and bad science and science taken out of context. Dr. Michael Greger, who wrote the book Carbophobia, which most of the research I'm using comes from, refers to these hucksters. We call hucksters in any industry snake oil salesmen. Greger refers to low-carb hucksters as steak oil salesmen, which I find quite an appropriate pun. In terms of the South Beach variation of low-carb nonsense and low-carb lies, the Tufts University Health and Nutrition Letter, a very respected periodical. Once again, folks, if you're not a research-oriented person, that's fine, but I'm using very respected periodicals here. The Tufts University Health and Nutrition Letter said this in their May 2004 issue, quote, "Disappointingly, the South Beach diet is simply yet another version of a fad wrapped in a gimmick." The article continued that the South Beach diet is, and I quote again, "based on fallacies, replete with faulty science, glaring nutritional inaccuracies, contradictions, and claims of scientific evidence, only minus the actual evidence." And that's from the Tufts University Health and Nutrition Letter, 2004, issue number 22. This same gimmick of misrepresented science and research is something Atkins practiced regularly, as I've alluded to above. None of this stopped the South Beach website alone, just the South Beach website alone, bringing in $1 million a week at the time in subscriptions, and of course the misleading nonsense of paleo was soon to follow. Again, lies for profits and the politics of stupid, and banking on the desperation of the consumer, who will always choose hope over experience and wish bias over truth, because consumers don't have time to do the research or to do follow-up. So what we see here is that with the modern internet now, all that is necessary is you got to get attention first. You get attention by saying ridiculous things like you can lose 85 pounds without exercising and eating 5,500 calories a day, or that pork rinds are great and bananas are toxic. You get some traction and build a following, and if you can do that, then any follow-up legitimate critique from academia that exposes it all as a gimmick is merely a whisper among the hordes of screaming, uninformed, gullible groupie fans who represent the politics of stupid. All right, so what they tend to do is they attack the messenger rather than investigate the message. I remind you again, Dr. Atkins claimed he followed his diet for decades, but he was grossly overweight at the time of his death, according to his own cardiologist. His own cardiologist released this statement. All right. Furthermore, the author of the South Beach diet had to take medication to lower his own cholesterol. And that's a quote from the book Carbophobia, 2004, page 5. So, and I remember myself speaking at a speaking engagement at a weekend conference symposium. I was sitting on a panel of experts, and I was sitting beside Dr. Barry Sears, creator of the Zone Diet. And I remember wondering to myself how long this fad would last. But it was amazing to watch people idolize him, the people in the audience, and how people respond to creators of fad diets like this, like the creator of paleo, etc. It's like they've formed some religious deacon or icon or something. The Zone, of course, also faded into relative obscurity. And a reviewer in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition, again, respected journal, the Journal of the American College of Nutrition, said this of the Zone Diet. And I quote, "In the scientific world, books like the Zone Diet are generally regarded as fiction." And that's from the Journal of American College of Nutrition, 2003, issue number 22, pages 9 to 17. To all the low-carb nonsense, a medical journal article titled, quote, "Food, Fats, and Fallacies," Food Fads and Fallacies, fads, not fats, referred to the Atkins diet as a new wives' tale with a sprinkling of fallacy. And that's from the Australian Family Physicians periodical, 1977, issue number 6, pages 155 to 159. In an article titled Near and Dear to reflecting my own opinion on all the low-carb lies and misinformation and misleading the consumer with nutritional fiction, not fact, is an article by Edward H. Reinerson, and he was only professor emeritus of medicine at the Mayo Clinic. The stature doesn't get much higher than that, folks, in terms of respected stature. So Edward H. Reinerson, professor emeritus of medicine at the Mayo Clinic, wrote an article called Americans Love Hogwash, which, perfect name, when he singled out Dr. Atkins for his, and I quote again, worthless, false, and ridiculous speech and writings. And to add a little thickness to the foundation here, a 2003 review of low-carb diet theories concluded, and I'm quoting, when properly in bold, italics, and underline, when properly evaluated, the theories and arguments of popular low-carb carb diet books rely on poorly controlled, non-peer-reviewed studies, anecdotes, and non-science rhetoric. ... Quote, a closer, authentic look at the science behind the claims made for these books reveals nothing more than a modern twist on an antique food fad. And that is from the Journal of the American College of Nutrition, 2003. So, you have a lot of stuff there. Now for this week, what I want you to consider, tune in to my Sunday Breakfast with the Coach. I'm doing a whole series. Next week I'll be talking about the lies of demonizing insulin in relation to carbohydrates. But for now, if you have a trainer or a coach that touts any form of low-carb dieting like keto or paleo, do you really think they're well informed, or are they just following internet hype and being one of the sheeple? We the sheeple of all the decades of stupid before them, the politics of stupid and low-carb lies and the politics for profit. So this has just been a brief history of what you should know about behind the scenes of what was going on with the history of low-carb diets. Now, here's a few things. So, folks, what I have here are some of the books that I've written. Well, first there's Carbophobia by Michael Greger, all right? Carbophobia, all right? This is one I refer to, The Scary Truth About America's Low-Carb Craze. My own books, Understanding Metabolism, all right? The Truth About Counting Calories, Sustainable Weight Loss, and Metabolic Damage. My other book, Beyond Metabolism, you probably can't see the titles there, How Your Brain, Biology, and the Environment Create and Perpetuate Weight Issues and What You Can Do About It. My other book, The Anti-Diet Approach to Weight Loss and Weight Control. And another one of my books, Permanent Weight Loss, all right? The Self-Nurturing Mindset and Habits and Diet Strategies for Genuine Lasting Change. And of course, my most popular #1 bestseller, The Cycle Diet, When, Why, and How to Use Refeeds and Cheat Days to Optimize Metabolism and stay lean year-round. So when you write that many books, folks, you do your homework, you do your research, became a bit of a historian in terms of fad diet, and what you come up with is how fad diets are based on a foundation of misrepresenting facts to the consumer. And this now is cycling over and over again. And as I said earlier, the quote, people who don't learn from history are destined to keep repeating it. So the politics of profits is what drives diet fad books and low-carb nonsense. And it's what we say is a diet has to have two things in order for a diet